Things happened in Nepal over the weekend and the world stood and said, what? This can actually happen. We're going to get into that conversation this hour. And just remind you that Ndu with you this morning in the Situation Room and our guest host, Jerry Kahiga, as well as Dungo Gachane. And the conversations that we're having this hour really is looking at what democracy is shouting out about today, and whether there are lessons from Nepal to the world, how freedom of assembly shapes democracy, and also looking from Nepal to Kenya. Joining us in the Situation Room this morning, our guests, Professor Peter Kagwanja is the CEO of Africa Policy Institute. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning, Du.
How are you doing?
I'm well. And yourself?
I'm well, thank you.
Very good.
Karibu sana, good to have you. Dr. Njoki Wamai is also here this morning, an assistant professor in politics at USIU-AFRICA and Co-Convenor as well. She joins us this morning. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning, Du.
How are you doing?
How am I? Upbeat.
You're upbeat?
Yes.
This is great. Upbeat is good. We'll take upbeat, as opposed to the other things that can happen. So we want to thank you, both of you, for being here this morning. We're going to share today's proverb. And we'd love to get your interpretation of it. Today's proverb comes from Egypt, one of the world's oldest civilizations. And then also, and like I said earlier, that we see modern manifestation, but that comes from the foundations of what was set in place from a long time. The use of paper, the use of math, the use of makeup that we see today, the use of certain preservation skills across board. I mean, you can go on and on and on. And that's the world in which we delved into the proverbs today. Today's proverb goes like this. The mouth of a man is in his sword. The mouth of a man is in his sword. Professor Wamai?
The mouth of a man is in his sword.
Yes.
I would want to say I'm not a man, but anyway. I think, thinking about the metaphor of the sword is what we used to, fight, kill. So maybe the mouth of a man is in his sword is also that sword speaks. It speaks what this person, what he does with this sword is probably what it speaks what he wants to do. So, yeah.
Okay.
I think for a man, words should speak louder than your words. So men in those days were known for war. How you show up in war, how you perform is what gives you the reputation, not how much you talk. I think it's a statement that let's see your action, not your words.
Let's see your action, not your words. Indeed, one to look out to. Well, speaking of action, the folks in Nepal over this week said, okay, we're not listening to you anymore. We are basically saying that the things that you have done is what we're going to go by. And let's take some chronology here with what happened in Nepal, taking the world by storm, essentially, is that there was a social media ban. And the social media ban essentially came from the office of the Prime Minister. And when he then said that, there's certain things happening and we are insisting that social media organizations either have representation here in the country, they must be domiciled as domestic businesses in order for us to then be able to regulate them, and also regulate them in terms of what can go onto those platforms. And so there was a ban. And the people stood up and they said, absolutely not. You cannot do this. The underline was that they were looking for a way to stop the expression of the people on social media in a way that they were not going to be able to control. Now, as all of this came out, we then heard that there were also other subliminal messaging about corruption that was happening from the government, and they said, we are not going to allow this anymore. As these frictions started, we also then saw the resignation of the Prime Minister, where he said, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. But it didn't end there. And the people said, no, we are going to take matters into our own hands. The former Prime Minister ran out was run out of town, literally. Was carried in the streets, was disrobed, and was found in a body of water somewhere adjacent to the city.
The Nairobi River.
The Nairobi River for Nepal. And media houses were burnt down. Parliament was burnt down. Everything came to a standstill, and we saw the resignation of a prime minister. And when the people of Nepal said, absolutely not. Before we even get into what the political intrigues could be and how you want to land this message, what would be your outlook on this particular situation in terms of where the people now were practicing their sovereignty, essentially? Prof, now this is great because now we have two professors in the house. So when we say Prof,
Prof,
Prof, the lady.
Thank you. No, I mean what has happened in Nepal is very, of course, it just shows the limits of what I would say. Moral decay in terms of democratic decay, if we are to call it that, and corruption. Because I think even if you check on social media, the people in Nepal are insisting the social media was just a trigger. You know, the ban of social media and the ban of this social media was just a trigger. We have so many serious issues, underlying issues, and one of them, of course, being corruption, elite impunity, which I think we will start also looking at the similarities between Kenya and Nepal. Elite impunity, and you saw are they called the Nepo kids? These young, the children of the elites. Living very lavish lives, and I'm so glad people put those videos together comparing these children of the elite versus the ordinary Nepalese children. And it's not like youth and how they are suffering. And of course that through social media really triggered what we saw. And we will see very many similarities also with Kenya. So going back to that question of sovereignty, I think one of the things elites don't understand, sovereignty belongs to the people, especially in a democracy. And if you even know the meaning of democracy, if you go back to Greece, where they started these ideas of Western democracy, demos means mob, and krasi means, rule, democracy, mob rule, that's what it means. And mob rule was based on the people's rule. And so the people took back their sovereignty. And that's one thing I think many elites don't understand. Once they get in those tools of governance, they assume that now we have the sovereignty, or now that we have the authority, we have this question of legitimacy. And that's a contract, that we have to keep negotiating. So once the state or the people who are running the government do the right thing, then that relationship is maintained, and that sovereignty. But the minute, I think, like what happened in Nepal, they do the wrong thing and really subverting the will of the people, then, and remember in the democracy, in a constitutional democracy, as Nepal, Kenya, the will of the people, the power belongs to the people, and the people can take it back, and that take back their sovereignty. So.
Professor Kagwanja?
I think if you look at many constitutions in the world today, the ones that have claims to democratic space, they all start with the people, whether it's the American Constitution, the Kenyan Constitution, and so on. By so doing, they are recognizing the sovereignty of the people. But it is very important how that sovereignty is exercised, because you can exercise it in a manner that it benefits the people themselves through what you can call delegation. So it is a principle of delegation that is the key of how the will of the people and the sovereignty of the people is done. The moment the people themselves take to the streets and begin to exercise their sovereignty directly without any regulation, two things happen. One, you can say we are in a revolutionary setting or situation where people are now reshaping the order of things, or we are in total chaos and anarchy. And that is where now you begin to ask, how does it end? So the American Revolution ended up in a bunch of group in Pennsylvania sitting down and crafting a constitution that is going to govern them thereafter. In France, it ended up in chaos, total chaos, until they had to bring in a military man, Napoleon, to restore order, who was more dictatorial than the monarch they had overthrown, and who did not only beat the map, but actually beat the neighbors. The Napoleonic Wars, if you remember. So the sovereignty of the people is a double-edged sword that can cut both ways.
And Prof, you said something very important, because listening to Madam Professor here is talking about sovereignty and people trying to take and explaining the word democracy. But where is the boundary between sovereignty and the use of extra constitutional means to hold these leaders accountable? Because in as much as the Nepal citizens, especially the Gen Zs, have actually, it's like they have held a coup because there is no government, and the military is now asking the Gen Zs to come and help form an interim government.
They didn't force him out, though. He resigned.
He resigned because of banning of parliament, the Supreme Court, their homes. But where do we draw the line between sovereignty and use of extra constitutional means to hold these leaders accountable?
First and foremost, you get to that kind of a situation when there is total frustration, total lack of confidence at any level with the government of the day, largely because of what we call state capture. You have total state capture of institutions to the point that people have no hope that their will be exercised legitimately within the established order. For example, today people are talking about parliaments. Are a parliament serving the will of the people or the power that be? You can talk about the executive itself. So when the three institutions of government lose total legitimacy in the eyes of the people, then this is where people begin now propelled to get out. But something else happens, that those exercising power begin to move towards authoritarianism. And therefore, people decide to confront them using the same means. You are beating us, you're beating us through violence. We will get to you through violence as well. And that's why these protests and these people-led revolutions have become extremely dangerous for both democracy and the state itself. And if leaders were to listen, never lure people into people-led revolutions, because it is leadership that pushes people to the edge. It is not the people who come to the edge. People want to be stable. People want to wake up in the morning and milk their cows. People want to go on with doing what they do. As long as it's profitable and their life is guaranteed and assured, their hopes and ambitions are met over time. But the moment they lose that hope, the moment they feel that leadership is not getting them anywhere, then this is when you begin to see people-led revolutions.
And then the question of I like what Prof is saying, but also listening to them. If you look at all the what we can call people-led revolutions against authoritarianism and not against impunity and everything in the last, is it 5 years? All of them are in authoritarian regimes or democracies. Let's call them, I don't know whether we can call them fake democracies or democracies that are not really, are not what we call a liberal democracy. They are maybe just a what I would call a mongrel democracy, like the one we have in Kenya. More of an electoral democracy. We meet for, exactly. We meet for elections every 5 years. But if we look at the constitution, we are not adhering to the Bill of Rights, that chapter where we are dealing with freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. So if you look at all those countries, whether it's Kenya, the protest we had, Nepal now, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, where else? All those countries, and also you can see they're all in the global south. So it tells you something that is going on here. First, we have a very large group of young people who are technologically very savvy. So they can see their counterparts across the world and they know what they deserve. And then they're into technology. They're emotionally also invested in their countries. It's very beautiful for me seeing people protesting with the flag, the Kenyan flag, for instance, or even in Nepal. We are appropriating instruments that were state, that defined the state and its idea of sovereignty at the top. And people are appropriating them and using them for themselves and saying, this is my country. The flag. So that's what I'm saying. A lot has changed, but the leaders or the rulers who are ruling with impunity don't understand that the ground has shifted. We no longer have the population of 1975 or the Kanu Baba Nabama who could be told this is the way and you agree. No, we are not longer there. We have a very different populace that is very even democratic and full of liberal values in themselves, and then they're confronted in this state that doesn't actually believe in the same thing. So there's going to be a lot of tension. And I believe even what happened in Nepal is a sign of things to come across Africa, across Asia. Yeah.
Do you think all these consistencies from one nation to another, maybe how would you describe our international laws, it being that for the citizens in Nepal to have felt that their authorities, because they have judicial systems, they have police stations and all that, but they felt the people in those institutions were not holding the government into accountability. And it has also happened in Kenya, whereby we as Gen Zs feel like we can't go to a police station and report the CS, you can't report the president. And even if you went to court today, it would be a whole different story. We've seen the president, we've seen young people paraded in courts, and they are being accused of putting up the president's image in a coffin, and the president can't come to as a witness, despite him being maybe the person complaining or the state complaining that this thing is against the president. Do you think the Gen Zs across the globe are trying to, or do you think within the next 2, 3, 4 years, because everybody is demonstrating in their own countries, now it is going to beg the questions, are our international laws or institutions that are put into place to deal with such international concerns? Because we can't, when every country is bringing in the same kind of energy and it is pointing out at one thing, the leaders at the top, then we maybe need to fix our international role in a way that we don't need it to happen in all countries for the international laws to act on these problems. Because the Gen Z maandamano was literally some few months ago. Last year, 2024, it again happened. And even 2024, Kenyans were looking at some countries that by then had done it already. Now, this year, Kenyans are saying, na Nepal wamefanya kutuliko. Next year, we need to pull up our socks. So how do we bring, now like a competition, do we need to now, as the community, the global community, focus on ensuring that this thing does not repeat itself? Because in as much as I'm a Gen Z, I feel like if we don't get a solution, and a solution that is going to apply maybe globally, despite our problems being very divergent, but I believe there are solutions that maybe if we stepped up a bit on our international laws, maybe we would find a solution. So that if I'm in Kenya and I feel the president is not working, I am confident I can run to somewhere and they listen to me very quickly and act on it.
Sadly, I'm not sure we have. Okay, first, the principle of sovereignty that many states love is what encourages this idea of nobody should interfere with our matters externally. But, of course, and you know what happened during why that was set up, and then, of course, the Cold War happened. But after the end of the Cold War, because of the numerous conflicts, especially in Africa and many other places in, of course, Eastern Europe, the idea of R2P came about at the UN level. R2P means responsibility to protect, that we should not just sit and say the borders are sovereign, like African Union, when they formed it, that's the first thing they said. We are not interfering with anybody. We are not changing the borders. Nobody should interfere with any country. But after the end of the Cold War, of course, because of the numerous conflicts and the fact that so many citizens in different countries were now left to a dictator or just some, So there is a principle of non-interference at the UN level. But of course, your guess is as good as mine, and Prof can explain better. Then many countries still don't, even the UN doesn't, that intervention doesn't normally happen because, of course, so many challenges. We've not seen intervention, but different countries sometimes have intervened. Like just our neighbors here, Tanzania, is it 1979 or which year was that? They intervened in Uganda
yes,
when Idi Amin was massacring his population. So Mwalimu Julius Nyerere actually decided, I'm taking matters to my own, and intervened. His friend Kenyatta refused next door in Kenya. So it can happen, but of course, given we would need, so much needs to go into R2P, so much is not done. Remember also why the current president and the former had to be taken to The Hague. Again, is that principle of intervention, right? Responsibility to protect. Because we cannot watch one dictator or an authoritarian leader, or even just a person who doesn't understand democracy, lead his people to that path. Yeah.
I think, Madam Kahiga, the issue here is a tension between that principle of sovereignty on the one hand and the globalized world, particularly owing to technology. When I get to my phone here, whether I go to WeChat or go to WhatsApp, I choose whether I want to communicate to you here within Kenya or to communicate with my colleague in Beijing or my colleague in Brussels. And in that communication, distance melts. It doesn't matter anymore. And therefore, what is happening in Nepal, for example, is very, very much here. It is not there in those Himalayan mountains. It is here because you are seeing it and experiencing it within your own milieu, your own environment. And therefore, there is that collapsing of mental boundaries. They're gone. So, Bangladesh and us last year were competing who is doing better in challenging the state. And the Bangladesh did better, just below Nepal. And they got lead of their leadership, and now they're there. Then Nepal's are there. Next, we have Indonesia. In France, the Gen Zs are there. So it's like wildfire. But it is one thing that is underpinning all this, the problem of the youth bulge. And the countries that have the highest expansion of their boom of their youth cohort are the ones that are facing it. Kenya, we saw it coming. We just deferred. We've continued to defer, and therefore the Gen Z problem is here with us. The big question is, what we needed to have done is to educate or give our skills to these Gen Zs and train them and begin to position them as builders of the nation and leaders of the nation. A long process, but now, before they are trained, before they are equipped, they want to take power. That's a problem.
And one of the issues that the government in Nepal was trying to control by claiming that they wanted to ban social media was to control fake news, disinformation, and misinformation. In Kenya, such efforts had been made in the past, but they flopped. Do you guys agree that there's a problem of fake news, information, and disinformation, and how can we control it without necessarily bringing the issue of censorship? Because in Nepal, that particular issue was interpreted to be a censorship issue. But is it a problem with us, and how can we control it without provoking the Gen Zs and other stakeholders?
We have to invest in technology. There is no way you are going to have a blanket ban on social media. Even you yourself, the one who is banning, after you ban, you need it. Because cabinet, meetings, communications are carried through WhatsApp. You have been sacked, or you are going down in government when you are removed from certain
WhatsApp
groups. So they become integral part of our lives. We are conducting fundraising for funerals, for weddings, for everything through WhatsApp groups. We are communicating as families, trying to understand. One brother is in New York, the other one is in Sydney, the other one is in Beijing. How do you keep the family together under the current circumstances? So technology is everything to us. So the moment you pretend that you want to control it without having a superior technology, like for example, you'll never hear of any bans of these things in China. No, you won't. But if you watch the parade during these celebrations of the V-Day in Beijing, try to be within let's say 1 kilometer of where that parade is taking and trying to check anything other than what is allowed by the government. It can't. Why? Because they have invested in technology to control their space. And therefore they can let people have their freedom to do wherever, but you can limit within which space you cannot go. Which platforms you can access and which you can't. So it is that problem where you use the crude methods of banning technology without giving an alternative, and two, becoming phobic of a world that is real. Yeah, there is nothing that prevents me from addressing President Ruto here because of technology.
Is it
you can tell him anything now what I want. So it's about me.
Okay.
And you can't control that. Under Kano, which most of us lived, as students, you couldn't. In fact, by the time you finish, somebody is out there waiting for you.
Of course, or in here for that matter.
In here, yeah.
You mentioned something, and that you said that to feel the full effect of some of these protests, especially then giving to the Gen Z, that without experience and proper leadership, that this all essentially is futile. And I wanted you to open that up a little bit. We can hear also from Professor Wamai, but if we look at the uprisings that took place, these were youth-led. Especially the Arab Spring. If we look into the Arab Spring, if we look at what happened in Sudan, it was a young woman who started this. If we look at what happens in Egypt, it was a young man who started this, and the youth in Tahrir Square came out and said, we want alternate leadership. Unfortunately, the alternate leadership that came in under Al-Sisi is what they did not want at the end of the day. If we look at what happened in other parts where the spring came up, it was the young people. If we look on the other side into Chile, where there was protests against the cost of transportation, that essentially is what broke the banks on that revolution. The majority of the people who were leading this charge are the ones who were going to work and earning minimum wage at an age between 19 and 40. Young people, again. Is it that they want to be the ones in leadership, or that they're agitating for a different kind of leadership to come in place? Because you mentioned that there is need for experience and leadership. Is it that these protests are towards better leadership, or that the protests are towards those who are protesting to be in positions of leadership? It hasn't worked. It didn't work in Egypt, didn't work in South Sudan. For all intents and purposes, didn't work in Chile.
I think what is happening in terms of people-led revolutions being young, in terms of their age factor, is very natural. When we're hiring for KDF, we hire between 18 and 25. I've never had a 70-year-old being hired in KDF. because that's not natural. Two,
your youth leader in this country is over 70. But
so in other words,
Yeah.
young people between the age of 18, actually to be clear, 14 years in normal other societies, all the way up to 25, 30. This is the warrior class. They are the ones, the Maasai cormorants. Ours, we call them Tungatis and all that. Now, because they are the ones who are giving service, Utungata is giving service.
Okay.
They are the group that gives service. But why I brought this point is because I'm deeply worried.
how?
I'm deeply worried about our leadership perception, and I'm in that leadership myself. And we are beginning to see salvation in the children that we should be serving. We should be saving. You hear, come 2027, the Gen Z are going to do this and that. Your children can't do anything for you. You've got to do something for them. That's why we have this cohort, the cohort that by the time we look at the population today, only 3% of Kenyans are above 65 years and above. If you just 3%. When you get down to Rutos and ourselves, that is when we get to about 10%. The rest of the people are below 50. And then when you come down to those who are 45, below 35, they're now 65%. Meaning, these are the way the structure of the pyramid is set is that we and you look at the wealth, the 3% have the total wealth and resources. Because they're there and they made it. The 10% have the rest of the wealth. So if you look at the population cohorts vis-a-vis the wealth control, if that's the study you are doing, then you will conclude that the minority have the wealth. But we are also supposed to invest in the youth so they grow. Now, the inverse is that we are now looking towards the youth to save us from the things that are undermining people-led societies. But the truth of the matter is that is basically what Wamai is calling decay. We are decaying as a democracy. What we should be doing, and the youth themselves are frustrated, and legitimately so, because there are things they expected. You want to leave school or college or a technical institute and be able to make a living without being dependent on your parents. You are seeking for freedom. But that does not mean that we have no responsibility as a country and as a people to educate and equip our youth for future leadership. The moment they come to power without that, then we start getting into problems. Because you will have the same problem we have had over the last 20 years. 15 years or so of the so-called Jubilee. The Jubilee leadership, and I'm speaking this boldly because I work with them. I've worked with them. They thought that putting all positions at the young people is basically democratizing society. They have run us down. That's why the Gen Zs are in the street, because they did nothing about equipping this Gen Z for the future. They simply put them in positions of authority, yet they cannot go up. Because you finish your undergraduate, you've not done your master's, maybe you have not even done refresher courses. In America, you go to Harvard from time to time to keep on refreshing yourselves. In South Africa, you cannot be a doctor unless every year you are going for a refresher course. Every year you have to go twice for refresher. Now, in our society today, we are now beginning to heap responsibilities on the Gen Z to liberate us, when we are the ones who are supposed to liberate our families, our youth, our babies, and equip them to serve this nation. So there is that discrepancy I'm talking about. Yes, let us tell them to take the vote, register as voters, and go and vote in 2027. That's a good message. But when you begin to hear some leaders saying that we want all the youth leadership to be young, then you have lost it completely.
I think we need all. We need, because look, our society is, as you've seen, different people, different ages, and there's that risk, of course, of having only one age group in power. We need everybody, the same way for us who are Also women, we keep saying we need, more than 2/3 of women, 50-50 in parliament. So we should look at our population and allocate, whether it's positions of power, parliament, proportionately to the number of people and their ages.
Yes,
because I think there is so much, what do you call it, wisdom that we also get from older people, fresh ideas from younger people. I don't know what us middle-aged people bring in, but everybody brings in so much.
Yes, but Professor, when you look at these issues of the youth uprising, the Gen Z protest from Kenya to Nepal, Bangladesh, to other countries, they are agitating for common things, issues of political corruption, elitism, nepotism, all those issues. And I remember when I was in school, when one school started striking, all other schools joined, and some even joined because of some very flimsy reasons, such as hiyo githeri iko na mafuta taa. So the question is it really a world problem, or is it because of peer pressure, or because the Gen Zs from another country want to go on strike or to protest because other countries are striking? We have to also ask ourselves these hard questions.
No, I think you should also ask ourselves, in countries where democracy is working, are they protesting? I mean, of course, we can say France, democracy
they're
works.
protesting on different things, but not for government to get out of place.
Right?
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to that social contract. Is the government listening to the people with the power? Remember, democratis, mob rule, the people who have the power. So somebody and elites, especially authoritarians, will easily use that card and say, it's just peer pressure, like those high school strikes. But there's nobody, I think, who gets on the street, just like what Prof was saying here. People want to be milking their cows. Gen Z want to be doing their IT stuff, technology. Nobody wants to be on the street every day for fun, unless there's something that has really driven them. And the channels that exist, that constitution that we created in 2010, that we are celebrating 15 years, it has very clear channels on so many things, but it's not implemented. Chapter 6 is not implemented. The question of integrity, corruption, the police brutality in Kenya, for instance, that issue. And look at this committee that has been formed. Instead of addressing the justice issues, you go around and circumvent and you say, let us first address compensation. There's nowhere where compensation is given first without addressing justice, though the two should always go together. So the problem is we do not implement our contract, which we've already written as the constitution, between the led and the followers. And once that happens, of course, people will use all sorts of extrajudicial ways, extra constitutional means of getting to be listened to. But remember, we have very clear ways of being listened to that are enshrined in our constitution.
And do they work?
They don't work.
And that's the thing.
Exactly.
So how do you get to a place where, because, okay, to an extent, if we look at what happened with the Nepalese just a couple of days ago, with because of the deliberate nature of the protests, the Prime Minister resigned for one of two reasons. Number one, he was either scared for his life, or number two, he got the message and said, okay, you know what, I cannot be here dabbling in this thing when there is so much corruption. Whether it could have been that he felt he made a mistake because of the social media ban, or that actually, hang on, these folks are serious about this thing that they're saying about corruption, so I don't want to be part and parcel of it. But do protests achieve the end goal? Will we now, as a result of these protests that we've seen taking place, I mean, look, let me be honest, the very violent nature that the former minister was handled in, are we going to see now an entrenchment of the rule of law in Nepal? Will we start now, because people are very cautious about how they govern, that we will see a reduction in corruption? Are we going to see that state agencies are going to start doing their job? Will we see, as a result of Tuesday's happenings, that there will now have governance turning on its head in Nepal?
I think it depends, just quickly. It depends, because also remember, the people who really also have the mouth power is the people in leadership. because it's the people we've already given power.
They're the ones who've mucked up the thing in the first place, Prof,
Exactly.
and that's why there's protests against them. How can the people who messed it up be given the responsibility to fix it?
And that's why they're being kicked out by these people. You see, and then in all these places, there's a laid down format when such a thing happens. Even in Kenya, you know, people would say, "Oh, there'll be a power vacuum." No, it's very clear. If the president resigned last year or this year, then the next person takes in power. That's the speaker or the deputy. And if the deputy is not, you know, the speaker, and after the speaker, there is even the constitution lays down 90 days transitional time. We have an election, and there is somebody elected. So us, but elites will always, especially the ones who have been fought, will always make it look like, oh, you know, we're not sure this can be implemented. So for me, even in Nepal, I'm sure there's a whole procedure laid down, and they're going to implement it. Whether or not it delivers the agitations or the grievances is another thing. And there are many places, as you've said, that people have gone mass protest and nothing happened, or things got worse. But also remember, there are places where this has happened and things got much better. And I, like Prof had already said, the revolutions that those revolutions that we keep talking about that defined the world. You know, the American Revolution, the French Revolution of 1789.
And none of those revolutions were without bloodshed.
Yes.
They were brutal. You know, we think about it like there's a revolution and people came out in their top hats and their ball gown dresses and they stood in the middle of the street and they said, hand over power. And they said, yes, here you go. No problem. You've done a bad job. We are here to do better. No, people were scalped. People were butchered. The revolution was bloody.
Yeah.
And that we speak about it today, but it did not pass through a very smooth channel, Prof.
But that's what we are going through now. The Gen Z revolution is going on. You know, some people are burying their heads in the sand. As we speak in Kenya, we are in the middle of a Gen Z revolution. Because tomorrow morning, somebody will wake up and say, we are going to the street, and the next thing you say, for the next 2 days, we don't have work. Why? Because it is not about who gets out. It's about the reasons that pushes them up to the streets. If the reasons are not addressed, then you are still in the revolution. That's why the removal of monarchies in Europe was seen as a solution. Because you have now removed the root cause of all the problems. In Nepal, they think by just sweeping the ancient class, the former ministers, former prime ministers. Remember, 3 prime ministers have been affected in this Nepalese revolution. In the sense that the former prime minister, and the current one are all put in one bag. The Nepalese are saying it is not about those we are kicking out. It is what they symbolize. And I think this is what we're calling the warning or writings on the wall. That for countries that are in the middle of Gen Z revolutions, in order to nip these kind of people-led revolutions, you need to go back to the good ways. And I like what Wamai has said, that, Prof, our constitution has answers to all our problems. Why? Because even it has answers to itself. If we are not happy with it, there are ways of changing it. We have referendums that enable people-led a change of the constitution rather than elite-led change of those constitutions.
I think it's interesting that you say that. Sorry, you're coming in just a minute, Jerry. I think it's interesting that you say that because holding on to power where the people of the country feel that, number one, you've done a poor job of it up until now, and then wanting to hold on to it then gives rise to things that we can see with the sentencing of Jair Bolsonaro yesterday to 27 years in prison. For what? For what? He's former president, military officer, but for what? Because him wanting to hold on to power even after his term was equated to a coup.
It's a Severian. They were calling it a Severian coup.
According to the people. And this is a man who served in the presidency, who now his lawyers are running up from pillar to post to try and appeal the thing. But the likelihood of Bolsonaro spending the next 27 years in prison is a reality. Not because he stole something, but because he suggested that he could stay in power longer than a term constitutionally assigned by the people. These are things that are happening as we live and breathe.
Yeah.
And so putting to that point that, you know what, it is not that we are demanding a certain thing of you in a position of leadership, of governance. You don't do that. We want you out. We're not necessarily saying we want to come and rule, but we want you out.
Yes.
But that's why the instruments of power that are handed over to any leader who is ascending to a place of authority, primary of them is the Constitution. And there is only one thing you are told and requested to do. Please govern us according to this Constitution. And you swear, I am going to govern you according to this Constitution. Where then does this idea of robbing us come in? What does this idea of displaying opulence, these, the wealth, demonstrated in public about what kind of shoe you're wearing, what kind of watch you are wearing, the cost of your sunglasses, the dollars you have spent on your car, which just move you from your house to our office, and it is costing us an arm and a leg.
So, Prof, let us flip the conversation a bit. Now that we all agree that the people in power have shown masses in different countries that there are things that they have done in excesses that have made the masses very agitated. But now that Kenya, we are heading to elections, and IEBC is now open for people to, take vote, you want to change your vote and all that. Let us flip the question. Do you feel, or what is your opinion about the voter? Because let's be very honest, if status quo remains in terms of what the voter did in 2022, the mass protest in 2028 we can't evade it. Because I have a problem with our double standards sometimes, because despite us saying that the political class is to blame, where do we get the balance between the blame we give to the political class and we, the voter class, and we, the common mwananchi? Because today, if you go to if me and you, Prof, go to Nyandarua County or Nyeri or Kisumu County, and we are both looking for the governor seat, me and you, in mind bearing that I am a Gen Z 24-year-old, you're a prof, you have amassed wealth over the years, you've made business, so in terms of resources, we don't come from the same par. When we go to Mashinani and I'm maybe using public means and you come with a Prado, the common mwananchi, when they want to listen to a politician, they'll be more swayed to listen to you more than they listen to me. At that point, they won't pinpoint opulence. Even if you show up in, Rolls, whatever vehicle, Mercedes or Range Rover, they will not pinpoint opulence. In fact, chances are that in Kenya, they will ask, sasa huyu amekuja na matatu, atatuongoza aje, But then again, let's flip it back to what happens when we get into power. If when you went to campaigns, you went to the Range Rover, and now you are the governor, chances are you'll upgrade to a better model, right? Yeah. Chances are I'll start now driving maybe a Prado or something, right?
Yes.
And the public will start saying, now this is opulence, So where do we get the thin line between a balance between a voter's demands to the political class when they want to listen to them and accountability demands when they get into power, because we are forcing the political class to do elections like business, whereby if you don't have 50 million, you can't go to vie for a member of parliament. If you don't have 400 million, you can't go to vie for a governor. In Nairobi, if you don't have $1 billion plus, you can't even think of campaigning for the governor seat, So I feel like we need to look for a balance so that we don't burden one side and we don't bring double standards. Because if you are okay taking money from the political class during campaigns and you don't pinpoint that as opulence, but then again when they get into power you pinpoint opulence and demand for accountability, don't you think we are becoming double standards?
So let me start by making three points. First and foremost, as a political class, now talking about the IEBC and related problems, you must be sure that if you want the stability of this country, do what is right, and as you go to election, aim to win clean without any questions. I was advising at one point the government of Uhuru Kenyatta at request, and I told them just before 2017, that you win this election, and I even gave the percentage would be 54% plus, but the problem will be you will not be able to defend victory. It's possible to win an election and you are not able to defend it because people are not convinced that you won, and people are not happy that you won, and people are not sure that you are going to do for the next 5 years what they want. So it's not about winning, it's about legitimacy, and that is what we should be aiming at. It is okay to win with 100,000 votes if people are happy. Like people are happy with what President Ruto had done in terms of his campaign. When he campaigned the Hasra, I was one of those who came out and said he won squarely because he had demonstrated. So 100 vote or 200 votes difference didn't make a difference. He was fighting against the government that time. But now that you're in government, you've got to have a better margin. Second, when I was running the constitution, I was the director. I had a problem because I said if we're going to get 50% or 51% or 52%, this constitution is going to be contested. We've got to get 65% and above. That's what I told President Kibaki. I said, what do we do? We get everybody out, even yourself, get out. We all go to Mashinani and convince Wanjiku that they need this constitution. We did and got 70%. Today, very few people question the constitution because at the electoral threshold, they got it. So this is why 2028 must be safe, or 2027 after the election must be safe, because you have worked towards a threshold that convinces Kenyans that you are legitimate. Okay. So that's one. Finally, we've got to do something about our culture of politics. And our culture of politics is nasty. It doesn't matter how educated you are. I teach at the University of Nairobi. I've not been paid, I think, since 2019. But I was telling Wamai. Okay. Because, I'm an adjunct professor. So how am I going to Muranga? And the government is holding my money. How is it, and it is also very retro. I think it's about 76 or something like that per course. So the point is, if you are out there doing corruption and doing business, as we call it, you are likely to be the leader. Are you going to give quality leadership? No. You are going to give this. So we have this vicious cycle, revolving door of bad leadership, people-led revolution, bad leadership, people-led revolution, because that's what we are at.
That's where we are. So just last words from you in about 30 seconds, Prof.
Yes, so I just agree with Prof. We have to change the political culture of Kenya, and the political culture is changing two things. The followers, these followers who want the Prado, watu Benzi, the followers have to change, and I think that is through political education, and I believe that's what we are doing here. That's what even in political parties, Njeri, you do. So political education has to continue, and we have a political school actually online called the Fixed Politics SPPG, where we are trying to train people to start thinking politics differently, start looking at the character, the competence of the leaders. So that's one thing. Changing the masses, I don't know how, many, we have to do so much work. I like that a lot is happening. That's why we have a lot of Gen Z who are now holding the leaders to account. So we are making progress, but we need to do more. The second thing is the leadership, so the followers and the leaders, and the whole thing of political, the political class. We have to kind of make it unattractive also, to attract these businessmen and tenderpreneurs who like doing politics. And how would we do that? I propose that we should have, it should be compulsory, maybe back to a policy or something, that your children, for instance, cannot go to schools. If you want to be a politician, your children have to go to public school.
And public facilities, hospitals.
This thing of people telling us, I'm graduating, I'm so glad my daughter is graduating somewhere in Australia. It is such a bad thing that you even do it. The audacity of even sharing, And you run a public. You're part of those people telling the government, capitation, we don't have school fees, we don't have enough school fees for the poor children who we want to be like your daughter one day, to get a degree. So we have to make public office only for people who are servant leaders, and that way is by first reducing this thing. You cannot patronize private services if you're running the public system. And I think, of course, schooling and hospitals, we will stop having those kind of funny people there. Yeah.
Conversations that we can have for days, but important for us to do. And just looking at lessons from Nepal to Kenya and how freedom of assembly shapes democracy. Professor Peter Kagwanja and Dr. Njoki Wamai have been our guests this hour. Thank you for enlightening this conversation with us. Asante sana.
Thank you.
Gone over
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.